Jangan lupa di-record ya, Kak, Bang.
Udah. Ini mau print screen dulu apa enggak?
Ya aja, Bang.
Oke.
Kita mulai lagi, Bang, Kak.
Ya, Mel.
Ya, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, all of my beloved friends. Today we are the member of the group 3 will present about the today's topic. There are 3 topics. Next, Bang. The first is a framework for evaluation, and then designing classroom language tests, and the last one is test methods. For the first topic, will be presented by me, Mela Fauzia, a framework for evaluation. Next. Very often teachers are left to make decisions on their own. For example, the teacher who observes one student who is better than others in a class must decide whether to recommend the students for placement in a higher class. So there is no precise rule for how much better a student must be in order to be advanced. And we need a strategy for making the decisions. So the aims of this topic is about to present such a strategy to illustrate how it can work in the classroom and to discuss the formulation of plans for effective evaluations. Next. Okay, here it's about the context of classroom-based evaluation. The figure 1, as we can see that actually the figure 1 summarizes the aspects of the teaching and learning that play a role in a classroom-based evaluation. Here there are 4 components. The first one is instructional purposes, and then instructional plans, and practice, and also the outcomes. So the 4 of the components are influenced by the input factors such as student needs and abilities, time, attitudes, resources, facilities, support, and teachers' abilities. Next. Next, Bang. Okay, let's see the each of the components. The first is the instructional purposes. It identifies instructional objectives and shape instructional plans. And the instructional plans, it is a means for realizing instructional objectives. And the instructional practices, it's about how the plans are put into effect. And the outcomes, it is such a language learning, new attitudes, or greater cultural awareness. Next. Okay, now we will discuss some simple example of how decisions are made in the classroom using the previous figure, the figure 1, as a frame of references. The first is example 1, changing purposes. So second language courses are designed to achieve a certain general objective, and specific objectives are chosen usually in accordance with the needs of the students. And unfortunately, often the students who actually enroll in a course do not have exactly the same needs with the objectives that has been designed. So there may be a mismatch between actual student needs and instructional objectives. So if the procedure for selecting the students cannot be modified, then the objective need to be redesigned. The example 2 next is changing plans. A mismatch occurs, for For example, because the instructional objectives aim for conversational proficiency, but the planned activities emphasize in written language. So the plans, including the text, need to be changed if the objective is to be achieved. Next. Okay, the example 3, changing practices. So there is a mismatch of the teacher's instruction for the activity in the classroom with how the students understand the teacher's instruction. So the teacher must take steps to bring the students back on the task. So we can conclude that in the previous example 1, it was the instructional objective that were being assessed. They were judged against the student needs. And in comparison, in previous example, the example 2, the objective were used to assess the instructional plans, and instructional plans were judged against the instructional objective. And in example 3, instructional plans provided a, a basis for judging the instructional practices. And for the example 4, not a teacher as the decision maker, students can also be a decision makers. The decision that teachers make is usually naturally enough, mostly affect the instruction. And meanwhile, the choices students might affect their learning strategy that they use, their study habits, and even whether they will take a particular second language course. Next. Okay, the next one, it's about a strategy for classroom-based evaluation. From the previous section, we can say that evaluation involves comparison, and more specifically, decisions that result from the classroom-based evaluation are arrived by making comparison between the various components of the instruction and also the input factors. And then, after that, we take action to reduce mismatches between the components so that the outcomes is achieved. So if there is no mismatch, the instruction can proceed without changing anything. Next. Okay, next is for the components in the classroom-based evaluation, actually there are 5 comparisons that can be done for classroom-based evaluation. Next. The first comparisons, we compare instructional objective and the student needs, such as goals, previous learning experience, and the levels of language proficiency. So in the comparison 1, the comparison can be made only if the student has the same background knowledge. Evaluation at this time allows the teacher to fine-tune instructional objective and plans in early on. And if the student's characteristic and objective are not compatible, then the changes to be the objective are warranted. And next is comparison 2. We compare the instructional plans and the instructional objectives. So if they are not compatible, then the changes to the plan will ensure a better match between the plans and objective. And if they are congruent, then it is reasonable to put the instructional plans into practices. And the last is comparison 3. We make sure that whether the instructional is being implemented as planned. The failure to attain objective, even though the plans have been put into practice, suggests that the plans are inadequate and need to be modified. And the failure to follow instructional plans may explain why students do not attain the aims or the objectives. Next. And the next comparison is comparison 4. We compare the instructional practices and the influence of input factors. So a question rises here, such as can the input factors responsible for the mismatch be altered so that we can reduce their influence? If not, a new plan that is less subject to the influence of these factors may have to be devised. And the last is comparison 5. We compare instructional objective and outcomes. So if a majority of students have succeeded, then instruction can proceed without change in plans. And vice versa, if a number of students do not attain the objectives, so the changes should be implemented. Next. Okay, we talk about planning evaluation. When planning evaluation, there are several questions which are relevant. The first is who will use the result of assessment and for what purposes? What will assess this and when will I assess this? Next. So who will use the result of assessment and for what purposes? Actually, the result, wait, okay. The result of assessment can be used by different people for different purposes. And usually in the classroom context, the result of assessment are used by second language or regular classroom teachers to plan ongoing instruction and by the student to reflect on and plan their learning and study activities, and also to the parents as well. The next question, what will I assess? An important focus actually of the classroom-based evaluation, whether it's about internal and external purposes, is the student achievement. So decision making in the classroom actually is not only about the achievement, but also about the processes and also the factor that affect the student achievement. It can be found in the student backgrounds and also the factors in the classroom itself, which influence the learning processes. Next. And the last is about when will I assess this? Most teacher assesses the effectiveness of instruction informally on a continuous basis. This may refer to a formative evaluation, and many of the teachers also do evaluation at the end of instructional units, and it also the teacher also can do evaluation in weekly or monthly or at the end of the year. Next. Okay, next we come to the next topics. It's about designing classroom language tests. Next. Actually, there are 6 steps to designing an effective test. The first is determine purposes, and then state the constructs or abilities, draw up specification, select tasks and item types, and arrange them systematically. The next is about the administering the test, and also the last is about scoring, grading, and providing student feedback. Next. Okay, in this chapter, there are 4 scenarios. The first is the scenarios 1 for the reading quiz. The reading quiz is for the secondary school students who are learning English in Brazil. And scenario 2, it's for grammar unit test. It is delivered at the end a 3 weeks unit in a grammar focus course at a high beginning level class in an adult school in the United States. Next. And the scenario 3 for the midterm test in a writing course in a university in Thailand that students at the advanced level have been working for half a semester on writing essays and mostly narrative and descriptive essays. And the last is scenario 4 for the listening or speaking test for in the 5th grade of a private school in Japan who have been taking a 15-week course in oral communication skill. Next. Next is about the determining the purpose of a test. So we have to consider several questions such as why are you creating this task? What is the significances and how important is the task compared to other student performance? What will be the impact on you and your students before and after the assessment? And once if you have established the major purpose of a test, the specifying its objectives then becomes easier. Next. Next is about test usableness. So here, the following checklist to determine the purpose and usefulness of an assessment. And there are 8 checklists that we can see in the slide and also in the PDF. Next. Okay, for the next explanation, it's still about the designing classroom language test will be presented by the second speaker, Dinda. Time is yours.
Okay, thank you for the change, Kak Mela. The next material will be explained by me, Dinda Salsabila Putri. The material is about designing classroom language test. In addition to knowing the purpose of the test we are creating, you need to know specifically as possible what you want to test. Reviewing everything you think your students and should know or be able to do, which should be based on the material the students are responsible for at the point in the curriculum. And remember that every curriculum should have appropriately framed, accessible constructs stated in the terms of performance by students. The next slides. The next material is about grammar unit test. In this grammar course, students equally use all 4 skills as they work with the grammar forms or structures. Therefore, to achieve content validity, the test should require the students to perform all 4 skills and some sample all 4 verb tenses. Here is the possible set of construct or abilities for you to work from. The next is drawing up the test specifications. The first one is grammar unit test and midterm essay. Next, test specifications or specs for classroom use can be an outline of your test, what it will look like according to CAR 2011, Davidson and Lynch 2002. For classroom purposes, the specs are your guiding plan for designing and instruments that effectively fulfills your desired principles, especially validity. Think of your test specs as a blueprint of the test that include the first one is the skills or abilities assessed, descriptions of its content, item types, tasks, skills to be included, specific procedures to be used to score the test, and the last one is an explanations of how test results will be reported to the students. The next is grammar unit test. The test specifications you design might comprise the following 4 sequential steps. The first one is a broad outline of how the test will be organized. The next one is which of the 8 sub skills you will test, what the various tasks and item types will be, and the last one is how results will be scored, reported to the student, and used in future class. The next is midterm essays. The curriculum describe an in-class administrations of an essay on a surprise topic. The specifications for this assessment might look like on the picture on this slide. Next. The next is about devising test items on the midterm essays and listening or speaking final exams. For midterm essay, the single test task includes the prompts, directions, and evaluation criteria. This could be one of the easiest kinds of test tasks to create because only one item is involved. Students' responses are open-ended and evaluation criteria have already been covered well in previous instructions. Next. The next one is listening or speaking final exams. The first one is listening comprehension sections. The constraints of your curriculum, the listening part of the final exam must take no more than 20 minutes, as already noted, because the students have become accustomed to taking multiple choice tests and quizzes in their classwork for reason or of practically and an impact. You decided to design multiple choice listening comprehension test with 3 different tasks. Here is the format you decided to use. Next is the next, please. The next is oral productions sections. Your curriculum allows you to design your own oral interview protocol. So you draft questions to conform to accepted pattern of oral interview. And here is the outline you decided to follow. The next please. And this is the draft from outline before. Next. The next is designing multiple choice items. Multiple choice item, which may on the surface seem to be simple items to construct, are actually very difficult to design correctly, which 2003 cautions against a number of weakness of multiple choice items. The first one is the technique test only recognitions knowledge. Guessing might have a considerable effect on test scores. The technique severely restricts what can be tested. Successful items are difficult to write. Beneficial washback may be minimal. And the last one is cheating may be facilitated. The next is design each item to measure a single objective. The first one is consider the following item from a secondary school class in English at the intermediate level. The objective is WH questions. The next. On other hand, here is an previous slide, Bang. On other hand, here is an item that was designed to test recognitions of the correct word order of indirect questions. Next slide, Bang. And the next is state both STEM and options as simple and directly as possible. We are sometimes tempted to make multiple choices items too wordy. A good rule of thumb is to get directly to the point. Here is a negative example. Next. And another rule of sustainedness is to remove needles redundancy from your options. In the following item, which word is repeated in all 3 options, it should be placed in the stem to keep the item as something as possible. Next slide, Bang. The next is ensure the intended answer is clearly the only correct one. The test item described earlier was suitable, but an earlier draft of the item appear as follows in the picture on the slide. Next slide. The next is use item indicates to accept, discard, or revise items. The first one is item facility or IF is extent to which an item is easy or difficult for the proposed group of test takers. IF simply reflects the percentage of students who answers the item correctly. The formula look like on these pictures. The next is item discrimination or ID. Is the extent to which an item differentiated between high and low ability test takers. An item on which high ability students who did well on the test and low ability students who did not score equally well would have poor ID because it did not discriminate between the two groups. The next is distractor efficiency. Is one more important measures of multiple choice items value in a test, and one that is related to item. The next slide. Next is listening or speaking final exams from the previous explanations where the format was presented. Will remind you of two parts of the test: multiple choice listening comprehension and oral interview. In the first part of listening test, your purpose is to assess comprehension of some of the phonemic contrast that students have focused on, which give you a great opportunity to design binary choice item. Next slides. The next material is administering the test. Pre-test considerations the day before in the class essay. The first one is provide appropriate pre-test information on the condition for the test, the materials that students should bring with them, the kinds of items that will be on the test, suggestions of strategies for optimal performance, and evaluation criteria like rubric or show benchmark samples. The second one is over a review of components of narrative and descriptions essays. The next is give students a chance to ask any question and provide responses. Next slide. And this is a test administration's detail. Arrive early and see to it that the classroom conditions, like lighting, temperature, clock, that all can see clearly, are conductive. The next is if audio or video or the other technology is needed for administrations, try everything out in advance. Next is have extra paper writing instruments or the response materials on hand. The next is start on time. Next is distribute the test itself. The next is remain quietly seated at the teacher's desk, available for questions from students as they process. The next is for a time test. Warn students when time is about to run out and encourage them to complete their work. The next is scoring, grading, and giving feedback. Scoring, the first one is scoring. Your scoring plan reflects the relative weight you place on each sections on the items in each sections. The grammar test has three sections, each with a number of scoreable items. Logically, then you could place equal weight on each sections and mathematically calculate a score. The next is the listening or speaking final exam for Japanese fifth graders presents potentially complex challenge because school policy requires 1 grade for the final examinations to be reported for each student. Next is about grading. Assigning grades to student performance on a test will be easy. Just give an A for 90 to 100%, or a B for 80 to 89%, and so on. How you assign letter grades to this test is product of the first one is country, culture, and context of English classroom. The next is institutional expectations, explicit and implicit definitions of grades you have set forth, and relationship you have established with this class. And the last one is student expectations that have been gathered by previous tests and quizzes in the class. Next slide. And the last is giving feedback. In the 4 example scenarios we have been referring to in this chapter, a multitude of options exist for giving feedback. The first one is reading quiz. The primary, if not exclusive purpose of the reading quiz was to prompt self-assessment and class discussions with no scoring or grading. Feedback was to some degree self-induced through the knowledge of what questions what got right or wrong, but more extensively in the form of whole class discussions of the reading passage. The next is grammar unit test. The most silent form of feedback is the total score and sub-scores, but perhaps the most useful feedback could come in the form of diagnostic scores, a checklist of areas needing work, and class discussions of the test results. And the next is midterm essays. All the types of feedback listed are feasible and potentially useful, but perhaps the kind of feedback that will contribute most to beneficial watchback would be the subsequent peer conferences and individual conferences between student and teacher. And the last one is listening or speaking final exams. The children in this class will eventually receive a letter grade for the course, which may include scores and subscore of the final examinations. With little else possible within the system, one might venture to say that the teacher could give some minimal oral feedback after the oral interview. I think it's all for me. Back to the moderator. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the second speakers. The next material is about the test methods. Will be presented by Vini Rafika Octavia and Aditya Ramadan. For the first part, will be presented by Vini. The time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Kak Mela and Linda, for presenting the previous material. In this section, we are going to discuss about what kind of method that we can use to define the task of the language evaluation and language test itself. Next slide, please, Bang Adit. Okay. In giving the methods of test performance, there are some factors that might be affected of the test performance and need to be considered. First is live versus recorded presentation that is performed by the students or by the learners. Second is the personality of the examiner. It will live on the objectivity and subjectivity of the examiner. And the third is the third is filling in the blank in isolated sentence instead of completing blank in text. It will also affect the students' performance because there might be a confuse or ambiguity in the sentences. And the fourth is the amount of the type of the text that need to be processed. Next slide, Bang Andi. Okay, so in this method, commonly there are 5 facets or aspects that affecting the test performance. According to Bahman in 1990, there are 5 facets that affect the test performance of test takers, that which included first, testing environment, second, test rubric, third, the nature of the input in the test taker received, and the fourth, the nature of expected response to that input. The last is the relationship between test and input. Next slide, please, Bang Adit. Okay, thank you. First we are going to discuss about the testing environment. Testing environment means the test takers might be expected to perform differently under different environmental conditions. This testing environment phases include 4 items. First is the familiarity of the place and equipment used in administering the test. Second is the personnel involved in the test. Third is the time of testing, whether it will be too short or too long for the test takers. And the fourth is physical condition that might be affected. Next slide, please, Bang Adit. Okay, the second is test rubric. Test rubric consisted the expectation on how the test takers will proceed to take the test. Test rubric includes 3 main facets as follows. The first is test organization. It includes the salience of part or the sequence of the part, which part need to be given first, second, and last. And it is also related to the relative importance of the part. So the most important parts of the test should be given at the first, and the less important should be given at the last section. The next is time allocation, and the third is instruction. This instruction includes the language that used in the sentence of instruction, whether it is clear enough or brief enough, or we need to make it brief and clear rather than make it too short with such an explanation. And also it also includes the channel, specification of procedures and tasks, and also explicit inclusiveness of criteria for correctness. Next slide, please, Bang Adit. The third, we are going to discuss about the nature of the input in the test taker receive. In this, wait a second. Okay, in this chapter, input means the information contained in a given task to which the test taker is expected to respond. Input has two main facets. They are input format and nature of language. In input format, we also can include the channel of presentation, mode of presentation, whether it will be put in the receptive mode, and the third is form of presentation. It usually consists of language, non-language such as picture. Language may be a reading passage. Non-language could be a pictures that is provided in the task. Or also you can combine both. So you can give the form of presentation by using reading passage or pictures. And the third in the input format is about vehicle of presentation, language of presentation, whether it is native or you have to switch it with the target language, or maybe you can combine native and target language. And the fourth in input format is identification of the problem. Identification of the problem, you should be specific or general, whether you want to correcting errors in underline or generally you want to just identify and correcting an unspecific number of errors. And the last one of the input format is the degree of the speededness. Input may be perceived as speeded if task taker perceives speed as a factor in performance. The perception of the speededness varies from one task taker to another. So in input format, it also defined by the, personality or the capability of the test taker itself. And the second, we are going to talk about the nature of language. It is when the form of input is language. It can be characterized by its length. It means that the longer language samples include more potential effects in terms of some test assessment, and also it characterized by disproportional content, whether it is about vocabulary. In vocabulary, you can choose the proportional content about frequency and specialization, and also about the degree contextualization, distribution of new information, type of information, whether it is concrete or abstract, positive or negative, factual or counterfactual. And also in disproportion content, we have to concern about the topic or the genre that we want to assess or give to the students in the task. In natural language, we also have to consider about the organizational characteristics such as the grammar, cohesion, and rhetorical organization. Meanwhile, in pragmatic characteristic itself, we can consider about illocutionary force, sociolinguistic characteristics such as dialect or variety. The next slide, Bang Adit, please. Fourth is the nature of expected response to that input. The nature of expected response in the input is the feedback which can be given expectedly or factually by the test taker. It is expected response has three main facets. They are format of expected response, nature of language, and restriction on response. We are going to discuss about the first. It is format of expected response. In this format of expected response, we need to consider some aspect or some side. First is the channel. Channel, it can be the oral or visual, whether you want to test about the listening comprehension. And in this listening comprehension, what you want to the test taker to make, whether it is to mark the correct choice or multiple choice question or responding the speaking. And then the mode of the format itself, it should be productive. When in the input, we use the mode of relative, I think, and in mode we use the productive. And the type of the response should be selected, whether it is multiple choice test, constructing, or interview test, and communicative proficiency. The form of expected responses can be language, non-languages, such as marking a mark or drawing a picture. And the language of response can be the native, target, or both. And then the next is the nature of the language that we use in the expected response to the input is about the length of the test taken, the proportional content, the organization characteristics such as grammar, and also the pragmatic characteristic. The last is restriction on response. In this restriction on response, we have some things or several things to be considered. It is about the channel. It is consider the variety of conditions, whether you want to do the test face-to-face, in a quiet rooms, or phone conversation. The second is the format of the response itself, whether it is restriction or unrestricted. The third is the organizational characteristic. It is such as the grammar forms that you want to use, whether it is multiple choice vocabulary, or you want to make the organization of discourse following a specific rhetorical pattern such as comparing and contrasting, arguing for or against, agree or disagree. And the fourth is propositional and illocutionary characteristic. The last is time or length of response. In testing, it is important the situation, and administrative consideration place additional restriction on time and length of the test taken. Okay, next slide, Bang Adit. Okay, for the fifth point, and for the rest will be explained by Bang Aditya. Bang Aditya, time is yours.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. It's me again, Aditya Ramadan. And in this occasion, I would like to continue explain about the phase shape of the test method. The relationship between input and response. There are three areas from the relationship between input and response. The first one is reciprocal, and then non-reciprocal, and the last one is adaptive input and response. The first one, we're going to talk about the reciprocal input and response. Reciprocal can be defined the use of language by one individual to produce an effect in another individual through the reduction of uncertainty with knowledge of result. So, one individual to another individual, a sender and receiver need to input, and then this reciprocal is that indicate the language used has communicative goals, and there is have interaction between input and response, have interaction and feedback, such as oral interview tests. And then non-reciprocal input and response. There is no interaction between language users, so there is no feedback in the non-reciprocal. For example, in reading a book, close or dictation test and listening comprehension test. And the last one is adaptive input and response. The relationship between input and response is adaptive if the input influenced by the response, but without the feedback. There is characterized a reciprocal relationship. For example, in multiple choice test, the first one teacher will give the first question in medium level, but if the student can answer correctly, the teacher will give the high level in the question, and if this question the student have how to say that missing, so the teacher will give the medium, will give the slow level of the question. So there are three areas from the relationship between input and response. And in this, we can see that different reciprocal have a feedback and interaction, but in adaptive there is no feedback and interaction. And in reciprocal, there is no feedback and there is no interaction. So just all from me and back to moderator.
Okay, that's all the materials, today's materials. So we come to the next session. It's for the suggestion, comments, or questions. If you guys have the question or suggestion for our group, please raise your hands and mention your name. Time is yours. Okay, Kak Nabila.
Okay, I wanna ask to your group about could you please explain why the live presentation versus the recorded presentation and the examiner personality can affect the test performance?
Can you repeat the question, Kak?
Please explain why the live presentation versus the recorded presentation and also the examiner personality can affect the test performance. As you have explained, as you has mentioned on the slide 50, the point number 1 and 2.
Okay, thank you for Kak Nabila. So your question is about the live presentation and the examiner live
Personality.
presentation. Okay, examiner personality.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone who want to ask the question? Yes, Nelvi.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. In this occasion, I would like to ask the presenter, in the context for classroom-based evaluation, there are four components: instructional purposes, plans, practices, and outcomes. And also in strategy, it has them. So what are the differences between those components?
Okay, your question is about what are the differences between those components. Is that yes? Okay, thank you, Nelvi. Is there anyone who want to ask the questions or suggestion or comments for the third group? Yes, time is yours.
Kak Mela, I'm sorry. Can you please repeat or make clearer question of Kak Nelvi? Kak Nelvi, can you repeat your question? I think that I still don't get the point of your question answer.
Yes, Kak Nelvi.
Okay, in the context for classroom-based evaluation and also in strategy, it has same components. They are instructional purposes, plans, practices, and also outcomes. So what are the differences between those components in the context for classroom-based evaluation and also in strategy for classroom-based evaluation?
I'm sorry, Kak Nelvi. I'm still. You speak too fast. It is between contextual classroom and
Strategy, Kak.
pardon?
Strategy.
Oh, strategy. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, we still open for one person who want to ask the question for our group. Please raise your hands. The time is yours.
Excuse me, Mela.
Yes, Kak Fitra.
Okay, thank you for the chance. Here, I would like to ask about administering the test, pre-test consideration. Actually, how the procedure of this? Should we administer the same test, like the same question when the students can answer the test well.
Okay, thank you, Kak Fitra. Your question is about the administering test for the procedure for the pre-test. Is it right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Kak Fitra. Okay, so we have 3 questions from the audience. So please give us several times to discuss about the questions. Thank you.
Kak Mela, if I may ask a question to Kak Fitra's question.
Yeah. Yes.
Because it's kind of unclear for me. I'm really sorry. I think I'm kind of slow today. Kak Fitra asked about the administering the pretest procedure. Should we use the same question? So the same question should be used to the same students in the next task, or it should be used to the other students?
In the next, yes, in the next test to the same student, I mean.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much, Kak Fitra.
Okay, I will try to answer Nalfi's questions. It's about the relationship between the strategy and also the context of the classroom base, which has been presented before. And actually, um, as I have explained before, that for the classroom-based evaluation, we have 4 components. It is the instructional plans, instructional objective, instructional plans, instructional practices, and also for the outcomes. So those are the context of classroom-based evaluation. And for the the strategy for the classroom-based evaluation, it's about how we use those contexts for the evaluation. So that I have explained before, such as the instructional purposes, instructional plans, instructional practices, and outcomes. We can compare those aspects. Those aspects we can compare each others. Yeah, for the strategy, there are wait a minute. There are for about 5 strategy for doing the evaluation for the context of classroom-based evaluation. The first one, we can compare the objective and the student needs, and for the next comparison, we can compare the plans and the objective, and we can also ask the question whether the instruction that we have planned is suitable with the instruction. And next, we can also compare the practices and also the input factors, and also the objective and the outcome. So each the components we can make we have a several strategy used for the context for the evaluation. I think that's my answer. Is there any other audience who want to give the additional information related to the NILFIS question, please raise your hand and time is yours. Okay, if there is no one, I go back to the Nelfi. So, do you catch the point, Nelfi?
Yes, thank you for the explanation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Kak Nela, as the moderator, I would like to try to answer Kak Nabila's question. It is related to the what is the relation between the examiner personality and the live and recorded presentation that may cause or may affect the test takers' performance. Okay, basically, this thing, there are some factors that may affect the students' test performance. One of them is yes, examiner personality and live or recorded presentation. Um, Based on the what Himes said in 1972, he argues that the language used in different speech events is determined to a large extent by the components of the context in which they take place. Components such as the participants between the senders and receivers, the setting, the topic, and the purpose. We are talking about the setting here, which takes place in live or recorded presentation. In live and recorded presentation, basically it is related to the students' anxiety. When they have to do the live presentation, they more have, like such a different motivation with the recorded presentation. Why is it so? First, because of they have much more anxiety to do the live presentation in front of the examiner that they have known before or not. The second is about the recorded presentation. Maybe they will be more uh, they will be more comfortable or such, but it can be vice versa. It depends on the student itself. Each of the students have different anxiety. Each of the students have different characteristic, whether they are more comfortable in live presentation or recorded presentation. And moreover, when we do the live presentation, the speech action that we use, it is different with the recorded one. So I think that's why the live presentation and recorded presentation it can be affected to the students or test takers performance because they have this kind of anxiety or preparation before. And about the examiner personality, it can be affect the test performance or the test result because of the objectivity and subjectivity. First of all, we are going to talk about the examiner personality. Each examiner has different point of view. Each examiner has different, behavior, and it will impact the confidence of the test takers. There are as the examiner we have to strict yes, but how you make it strict during the test, um, it can underestimate or it can encourage your test takers, right? Moreover, when the examiner is someone that you have not known before, it is the someone that you have not known talk to. For example, like this, when you have a conversation with your friend, or when you have a conversation, when you have a test with your teacher, it is more comfortable for you rather than when you talk to some other strangers that come into you and have a, like that have a deep underestimating or superpowers personality or behavior that might make you down, and it will impact or effect to your performance. And second of all, we are going to talk about the objectivity and subjectivity of these examiners personalities too. um, when the examiner's taking a place, we know that they have such a parameter or they have such a standard of the score. But we have to admit too that this standard can be uh, can be differently understood or can be differently interpreted by the examiner. My interpretation of a good speaking is different with Kak Mela's interpretation in good speaking. I don't know it. It's just my point of view. In my point of view, when you talk and your grammar is not really correct, that's good. You can get a score 5. But maybe when Mela being the examiner and you talk or you speak in English with the good vocabulary but not a good grammar, you can get 5, you can get 4 or 3. So this called the objectivity or subjectivity of the examiner. Even though we have the standard, even though we have the parameter of each test assessment, but it can also, but we cannot make our mind or we cannot make our understanding and perspective in the same way. So I think that's why this kind of these two things can affect the students' performance or result. I think that's all. If there is any one of the members of the group want to give additional information, uh, please, time is yours. Maybe Kak Mela, Bang Adit, or Kak Dinda, or maybe our friends in this forum too.
Okay, thank you for Kak Vini. Okay, before we move to the next question, I want to ask the audience if you want to add some additional information related to Kak Nabila's question. The time is yours. Okay, from the group, I think Kak Vini's explanation is more enough. And I back to the Kak Nabila. Do you catch the point?
Okay, I got the point. It's pretty enough for me. Thank you, Kak Vini, for the explanation.
You are very welcome.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Kak Fitra, can you repeat for the question, please?
Okay, my question is about administering the test about a pretest consideration. So, I would like to know how the procedure of this conduct the pretest consideration. Should we administer the same test, like the same question, when the students can answer the test well? That's my question.
Okay, thank you, Kak Fitra.
Okay, Kamela, if I may give, if I may try to answer Kak Fitra's question.
Okay, yes, please, Kak.
Okay, Kak Fitra question is, should we use the same question to the same students in administering the task, especially the pretest, and what is the procedure of administering this task? Is that so, Kak Fitra?
Yes, Vini.
Okay, in my point of view, we cannot, I think that we cannot use the same task to the students in pre-test and the next task. Why? Because when we want to make it as the pre-test, we want to make such a comparison between the students between. Oh, wait a second. When we use the pretest, we just like giving such a, how to say, gambaran or the general situation about what this test can be take, or how this test can take, or what kind of test, what kind of question that will be tested in the real test. Um, in this test, in this pre-test, usually it is like you review or you recap all of the lesson that you have been taught before. So it will remind you of some subjects that you may forget before. And when we use the exact same question in pretest, it means that maybe you do not want to trust your students. Rather than using the same question, maybe it is much better if we use the same context or same topic. If we use the exactly same question, in my personal opinion, I think it is not the test, but you just give like a cheating moment to your students, or simply just we do not trust to our students' capability. And about the procedures, I think in the pre-test that we can do the day before in the class, we can provide appropriate information such as the review, like that, what kind of topic, what kind of genre, what kind of question that they will get in the test. So they will prepare it. For example, when you said that the test will be an essay, and then the students may prepare themselves to read a lot and to gain such an information and to train themselves to write an essay. When you said your students that um, the test will be in spoken, or the test will be in multiple choice, they also will prepare themselves well. So when it comes to the spoken test, they will train and they will exercise themselves well in doing the speaking test. And in the pretest consideration, in the pretest, we also talk about the materials, what kind of topic. So you cannot uh, give the task that you have not taught to your students. When you teach them present tense or past tense, it is basically the test material is about past tense and present tense, and what kind of item it is, what kind of item, and you can also give the suggestion or strategies. So when it is, for example, in the pretest, you can give such a help or the strategies that you can use to answer the question. For example, when it is about the grammar, how you can define what grammar is it, and how can you point out what kind of adverb of time that you can found in that sentences that will administer you to the real answer. And also in the pretest, I think we can also give the evaluation criteria, such as you can say to your students um, what kind of answer, or if this is essay or such, what kind of answer, or how score that they will get if they want to pass the test. For example, you will provide 5 questions, and each question you can tell your students each question has or contains 10 points or 20 points, so they know uh, which one of the question that will be more important or that will gain more scores. And also you can give open for question and respond for your students too. So I think the procedure is about review, and then you give the kind of material, what kind of material and genre that will be tested, and then you can also give a suggestion of strategies, giving the evaluation criteria, and also provide responses and open for question. I think that's all from me. What about the other members of the group? Maybe you guys can give such additional information.
Yes, Kak, I would like to give uh, opinions about Kak Fitra's question.
Yes, time is your, Denisha.
Okay, related to Kak Fitra's question about the pre-test. So of course that the pre-test that teacher do in a classroom, the main goals is to know the peer knowledge of the students. So of course that it can see that the knowledge, the peer knowledge of student related to the material. For example, when the teacher come to talk about or teach about narrative text, and then before going to explain and do the activities related to the narrative text, the teacher can give the pre-test to know the peer knowledge of students, such as give the task to know that the student's ability in narrative text maybe is such as the grammar or can the vocabulary or the structure related to the narrative text. So of course, before when the teacher going to talk, explain the material about the native text. So of course, in the classroom, the teacher start to explain about the material and then include the variety of the activities related to narrative text to make the student understand what is narrative text, what the structure can be used, and then what the vocabulary, the appropriate in narrative text. So of course that after that, the teacher can see the progress of the student about their ability, their knowledge about narrative text. So of course that when we use the test again with about narrative text, so of course we can see that the progress of the student. We can see the score of student, which one the item that can the students strengths and then weaknesses. So of course the teacher can give the evaluation and then feedback for the student to make them achieve the learning objective, especially in narrative text. So I think that my opinions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Denisha. I also want to add some information related to the Fitra's questions and also related to the previous answers from Kak Vini and also Denisha. And I think that for the pretest is such give the information for the teacher. As we know that for the pretest it gives before it gives the to the student before the activities start. So it gives the teacher about the how is the ability of the student in the class before giving the materials. So uh, I think it is not suggested for the teacher to use the same pretest for the next activities because it is such as for give the yeah for how can we know the ability of the student, their background knowledge, how far they know about something. So we give the pretest to the students. So I think for the it is not suggested to use the same test for the next activities. And I think it is suggested to improve and it is also uh, it's also suits with the students' needs after the test. I think that's all from me, and I want to ask to the audience if is there anyone who want to give the additional information related to the to Kak Fitra's question. Time is yours. or others, the presenters, others member group, is there anyone who want to give additional information? Okay, if there's no one, so I back to Kak Fitra. Do you catch the point?
Okay, Mela. So the point I can catch is pretest is used to know the knowledge and or ability topic that will be tested, such as a level of students, kind of material, and how the students do the test. Okay, that's clear enough for me. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, we still have 5 minutes more. Is there anyone who want to uh, ask the question? More question? Please raise your hands.
Mela.
Okay, Kak Shiva, time is
Okay,
yours.
I wanna ask a questions. It is related to the questions in a test. Okay, in designing a test, what needs to be considered in planning the number of question on a test? That's my question, Mela.
Okay, can you repeat the question, Kak?
Okay. What needs to be considered in planning the number of questions on a test? Okay, did you get the point, Mela?
Okay, what needs to be considered for how many questions that we have to create in a test? Yeah.
Yes, Mela. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Kak Shiva. Is there anyone who want to ask the question? Okay, if not, please give us several time to discuss about the answers. Thank you.
Kak Mela, if I may give any answer or information related to Kak Shifa's question.
Okay, yes, please, Kak.
Okay, Kak Shifa's question is in designing the task, what need to be considered in planning the number of the task? The number of the question, probably. Okay, in my opinion, maybe it is just a simple or basic things that we need to be considered. It is about the time allocation, the student's capability, and also the type of the test. So related to the time allocation, we know that not every children or not every test takers can use the sufficient time to finish the task. So we also have to consider about our students' capability, whether all the capability of the students are sufficient enough to complete or finish the number of the tasks. So when your students' capability is varied or they have a different capability in learning English, we have to suitable it with them. So I think the first time is about the time allocation, whether it is too long or too short. The second is students' capability about the task. So we cannot we cannot give so many numbers of questions when our students are not capable enough to answer the question in such period of time. And the last is the type of the test. The type of the test, it means that there are 4 skills in English that we need to be assessed, such as grammars, listening, speaking, and written tests. So in planning the number of the tests, when we want to assess the reading test, the reading assessment, we have also considered about the types and related to the time. So when we want to give the speaking test, we also have to consider about what kind of question, how much time allocation that we need, and also how many questions that we want to answer to the question, to the students, I mean. So yeah, I think basically those 3 aspects that need to be considered in planning the numbers of the test. First is the time allocation. Second is the students' capability, because the students' capability is varied. They are not all the same. And the last is the type of the test, whether you want to assess grammar in multiple choices, or you want to test the reading, or you want to ask students to write an essay, or you want to assess them in speaking tests. I think that's all, Kak Mela. I give it back to the moderator.
Okay, thank you, Kak Vini, for the answers. Is there any others audience who want to give the additional information related to Kak Sifa's question? Time is yours. Okay. If there is no one, how about you, Kak Sifa? Do you catch the point?
Okay, thank you, moderator, and thank you, Vini. So I conclude that there are 3 considerations in planning the numbers of the question in a test. The first one is time allocations, and the second one is the student's ability to finish the test, and the third one is the types of the test, whether it is reading test, speaking test, or writing test. Is it right, Vini?
Yes, Kak.
Okay. Okay, thank you for the group. Thank you for the answer. I give it back to the moderator.
Okay, you're welcome, Kak. Okay, the time is up, and I think that's the end of our class for today. I do apologize for the weaknesses for our group. Thank you very much for your attention, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Kak, ini nggak di screenshot.